From releasing an entire spin-off solely based on actual crimes to using a combination of not one but two for inspirations in one episode, here are all the times the NCIS used real crimes as their inspiration on the show. Starting with the episode that started it all, the very first episode of the first season of the American crime drama TV series NCIS, titled Yankee White, is based on true events. With a total viewership of 13.04 million, the episode showcased a Navy commander assigned to carry the football on Air Force One, who passes away under mysterious circumstances while in flight, leading to an emergency landing in Wichita, Kansas. While the commander's death was initially ruled a tragic accident, NCIS later finds evidence that the commander was murdered, and that his death may have been related to a possible assassination attempt on the US president. Now, many of you may not know this, but a nuclear football actually exists. It's safely, or perhaps safely is a more subjective term when it comes to nukes, tucked away in POTUS's emergency briefcase, something he can access anytime and every time in case of an unexpected turn of events. And folks, that's how the writers got the inspiration for NCIS's premiere episode. That trend continued on to Season 3, too. The third NCIS Season 3 episode, titled Mind Games, wasn't all fiction either. The episode that showcases how in 3 days, a deranged serial murderer who killed a number of girls while leaving a mark on their backs and stealing their tongues as souvenirs would finally be put to death, and hope he stays that way. Now, I'm sorry to spring this on you, but our little convict from that episode was inspired by two real-life serial killers. Yep, Boone has characteristics in common with Ted Bundy and Henry Lee Lucas. Ted was a rapist who pleaded with authorities to delay his execution by providing them with information about missing girls who had never been discovered before, while Lucas was a serial killer responsible of many killings, the first of which was his mother, and then a prostitute being the first victim of his crimes. But that's not all. Unlike the show, Bundy, a real-life serial killer, escaped custody twice, and ended up killing more people during both escapes. My only question is, shouldn't you stop after getting caught once, let alone twice? But thankfully, he was recaptured and executed via the electric chair on January 24, 1989, at Florida Station Prison at the age of 42, successfully putting an end to his killing spree. As for Lucas, the Texas Rangers, who had been looking into the case, suffered greatly as Lucas quickly withdrew his confessions, with the exception of the claim that he had killed his mother. This also raised significant awareness of false confessions and led to a reevaluation of police tactics and investigation process. Well, at least they learned from it. Lucas, on the other hand, passed away at the Ellis Unit Jail in Huntsville, Texas at the age of 64 on March 12, 2001. It gets creepy when you know it's based on a true story, right? Well, it's about to get creepier. NCIS launched an only true crime-based NCIS spin-off too. Yep, the CBS television series NCIS New Orleans is also based on real-life experiences, this time with a more personal touch. That particular show follows the stories of veteran agent Dwayne Swear, who continues to work with regional sheriff's offices. And man, oh man, the instances and connections he highlighted were so intriguing that what started as a sweeps episode concept evolved into a third series of a successful franchise. The show had a backdoor pilot situation going on too. It had the kind of reception that every network executive would fight for, an average of 17 million viewers for both the episodes. I mean, of course they had to turn it into its own TV show, right? But to ensure that it continued this way, NOLA executive producer Gary Glassberg and the cast tried to differentiate it from the previous two shows as much as they can. Despite the fact that there are still crimes to be investigated and criminals to be apprehended, they wanted to stand out by heeding Swear's tales and suggestions. So they fashioned the lead, Agent Dwayne Pride, after the man that started it all, bouncing off ideas and scripting an entire series after a veteran. Yeah, that ought to be the recipe for success for any true crime show, right? It gets better. The 9th episode of NCIS New Orleans, Season 6, Convicted, was inspired by real-life cults like Jim Jones. The episode turned the focus back to Christopher LaSalle's death, and in particular on Eddie Barrett, the man who was suspected of being his killer. In the show, Barrett is a cult leader who raises lost children. Yeah, you already know where I'm going going with this, right? He ends up brainwashing them and forcing them to do his bidding. In this case, it means killing others and even sacrificing their own lives. Of course. Now, he isn't your typical scary, slightly creepy serial killer. No, this man is basically next level. The fun thing about this episode, if you think true crime is fun, that is that it does a deep dive into the mind of a cult leader, which is all based on facts, research, and actual cult leaders. Barrett, for instance, has been shown on the show as a handsome man with kind eyes and a certain charm that makes everyone like him. Well, everyone but the NCIS crew. The strange thing about cult leaders is that they have an impact on everyone around them. But the question is, what gives a cult leader their immense power? Well, Dr. Yanya Lalich, professor of sociology at California State University, says that most cult leaders act in certain ways in order to create power imbalances. According to her, narcissism is to blame. They simply demand extreme loyalty. In a situation like that, a normal person will simply succumb to the traumatizing demands of brainwashing if the situation is severe, and he's alone with no obvious means of escape. Yeah, that's not a situation anyone wants to be in. But not all their based on true events episodes painted grim pictures. Some of them shared hope and empowered survivors too. An NCIS episode called Double Back included a plot in which one of the characters, Delilah Fielding, will have to learn how to live with paralysis. The executive producer, Gary Glassberg, disclosed that the Boston Marathon bombing survivors served as the inspiration for how the story unraveled. At the Television Critics Association press tour, Glassberg told reporters that he remembers seeing a piece on the Today Show about a bunch of women who had really managed to start to pull their lives back together again, and that's when it struck him. He wanted to push that message across too, and that's exactly what he did. Glassberg was distraught by the news of the bombing, in which 3 people were murdered and another 250 injured. When 2 bombs exploded at the Boston Marathon's finish line back in April, that he knew he had to channel that into something positive, something that allowed people to make the best out of the rough hand they've been dealt with. So, through the show, he made Delilah permanently paralyzed due to the bombing and used her to tell that story. The goal was to show a person with government experience who is involved in something tragic like this and manages to come out on top. And that's how they mapped it out. It was revealed that McGee's girlfriend, Delilah, who had suffered serious injuries in a bombing at a gala at the end of the previous episode, was now paralyzed. But Delilah Fielding went on to take control of her life and rise up after what she's been through in later episodes, which was what Gary wanted all along. He was very excited about the arc of what that character is going to face as someone in a wheelchair and how that's going to be portrayed. Because at the end of the day, it's a psychological challenge as much as a physical one. Well, it's safe to say that Gary did inspire many fans all over. That's a wrap on times NCIS used real crime as an inspiration.